Welcome to the Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 electronic meeting of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. This meeting is being held electronically, but we intend to conduct this meeting similarly to an in-person meeting. Public comment will be via telephone or Zoom only. To speak during any of the public comment opportunities, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or join via the Zoom link. This information is also available on the published agenda, in the public notices section of the city website, and on the broadcast of this meeting on CTN channel 19. All right. Now, Chris, if you would please do the roll call.
Okay, I will now call roll. I've received regrets from Commissioner Margolis, who will not be able to attend. Please say here and from where you're dialing when your name is called. Commissioner Bolin.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Ackman.
Here, Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Brovin.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Alkamaki.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hook.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Kaler.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Clayman. Okay. Commissioner Lee.
Here from New York.
Okay. Commissioner Anderson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hess.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Lieutenant Mike Sherbo.
Here from Ann Arbor.
Okay. And with that, we have quorum.
Thank you. There are two items on the consent agenda tonight, approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes. Are there any modifications to the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? All right, moved by Megan, seconded by, I think, Dharma, maybe? Yep, okay. All right, all those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand or say yes. Any opposed? Raise your hand or say no.
Yeah.
All right, consent agenda is approved. Now we're on to the public comment section. This is an opportunity for persons to speak for up to 3 minutes. Again, please call 206-337-9723 and enter meeting ID number 934-6385-2907 or connect via Zoom as described on the agenda. City staff will select callers that have raised their hand one by one using the last 3 digits of your phone number or the person's Zoom ID. In order to electronically raise your hand to indicate your desire to speak, please press *9 on your phone or select the raise hand button in Zoom. You'll hear an automated announcement that the host is allowing you to speak. When speaking, please move to a quiet area, mute any television or background sounds so that we may hear you clearly. Please state your name at the beginning of your comments. All right, do we have any hands raised, or it doesn't look like it? You seen anyone?
I do not see any hands raised. While we give folks a moment to see if they want to speak, I do want to highlight there were 4 emails inclusive of attachments in the written communications to the Transportation Commission. One of which included an attachment from the DDA, including a report for their people-friendly streets outcomes report. So that was uploaded, I think, Monday or Tuesday. And that was my fault for not including it earlier, so my apologies. But I did want to draw your attention. If you open the packet on Friday, there are a couple additional attachments since Friday when it first posted.
Yep, it looks like, by the way, Molly's in the attendee. Yeah, I looked through that report, the DDA report this afternoon, and yeah, I strongly encourage everyone to look through that. There's a lot of good information in there. All right, looks like we've got Molly. Hi, Molly. All right. I don't see anyone else or anyone for public comment. All right. So with that, I think we can get right into business, Raymond. First up, the Granger State to Packard Traffic Calming Project. The petition process for the Granger Traffic Calming Project between State and Packard is complete and is now before us for a recommendation. So I'll ask Raymond if you could please review the project and answer any questions before we make a recommendation. Raymond?
Very good. Thank you, Brett. All right, hopefully my screen is now showing. Okay, so this is the section of Granger between State and Packard, as Brett just mentioned. This petition was received a little while ago, and it has kind of been the first one to go through this latest round. There are 4 devices being proposed as part of this. So there is a raised intersection at Granger and White. There's a raised crosswalk at Park and Granger. There's another raised crosswalk at Golden and Granger. And then the final device, the 4th device, is a speed table just east of the midway point between Golden and Packard on Granger. So, you know, as is par for the course, the way this process unfolds, we had our consultant help us with this process and project. We had, you know, some exploratory ideas that were rolled out in the first meeting. Then we make refinements to that based on the feedback we hear from the neighborhood, and then come back with a final design concept, which is the one that you see before you. We kind of roll that out, get a final kind of read from the neighborhood to see if any last minute adjustments are needed or not. And then we ultimately send it out to the neighborhood for a vote. We did hear back from residents. Of those that we heard back from, 75% support this project. And so that's enough to advance it forward. So for the process, we bring it to the Transportation Commission first before it goes to City Council. We are teeing this up for the 2nd meeting in June for City Council, depending upon, well, you know, regardless of what the recommendation is from the Transportation Commission, it will forward along, but your recommendation will be reflected either in the positive or the negative for the project in the resolution itself. I will note the project cost is a little expensive. This tends to happen, especially when we have raised intersections, because it's just, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, especially if there are manholes or other kind of infrastructure that needs to be raised. So this is just shy of the $200,000 mark to implement these 4 devices. Just something to be mindful of, especially, you know, given kind of the budget that we have available to us, but it is the project that seems to be the most supported by the neighborhood. So with that, I do have the resolution up, but you know, it kind of goes into some of the background and the details of, you know, the process. Here's the 75% of surveys reported, positive response, and the cost is identified there at $198,000. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand, either virtually or, yeah. Julie?
Can you remind me what a speed table is?
Yeah, it's like a speed hump. Speed table and speed humps are just varying widths.
Okay.
But they're very similar. You know, a speed table, speed hump, and a raised crosswalk are kind of birds of a feather. They're very similar in nature.
So in that stretch, there are 3 raised elements in the street. Is that right? Two raised crosswalks and then this speed table.
Correct. And then there's the raised intersection as well. So 4 total.
Oh, 4. Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Molly?
Raymond, can you remind us what the total annual traffic calming budget is?
Yeah, so we have $260,000 in this fiscal year. So the way we're structuring this grant or this petition when we take it to council is any unspent funds from this fiscal year, we're going to ask to roll over to help pay for some of this and then dip into next year's as well. But, you know, we are still trying to march as many of the petitions forward as possible. And then if we do hit a point where there's a supplemental budget ask that's needed, depending upon how expensive the other projects come in, we can kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. we're hopeful that not all of the projects will be this expensive. Raised intersections just really are a pretty expensive device, and this one is, includes one, so that's why this one's a little bit heftier than what we might expect on some of the others.
Okay, thanks.
Julie.
Yeah, I don't mean to dominate the discussion, but this is kind of a follow-up. So is there any diminishing returns to that many raised elements? Like, would 3 be enough? I'm just thinking about the cost and, how to be equitable to other neighborhoods as well.
Yeah, what we try to do is have a minimum spacing between devices that kind of ensures their effectiveness. I can't recall exactly what that measurement is. I want to say it's around 250 feet. So all of these devices are spaced, at that distance or greater. I think it's what we try to do is come up with concepts based on some of the concerns we hear from the neighborhood, some of the behaviors. Oftentimes it's speeding or cut through traffic through the corridor itself. But then, like the raised crosswalks are meant to obviously slow vehicles down, but then also improve the pedestrian environment. And that's oftentimes what we do with the raised intersection. So, for example, the raised intersection at White, includes the crosswalks as well in all directions. So then that way you have kind of that added benefit for that. So, in terms of, whether it's too many or too little, we just try to strike that balance in some of the back and forth conversations that we have with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Dharma.
You started to touch on this, maybe it's obvious, but what's the benefit of the raised crosswalks over the speed humps? Is it pedestrian visibility or?
Yeah, it's really about that relationship of where the crosswalk is in relationship to the traffic calming device. So when we do a raised crosswalk, we kind of get a twofer, right? We're getting an existing crosswalk, brings the pedestrians to higher prominence, gets cars to slow down at that crosswalk. And I believe, I think it's on the other Granger project. So the benefit in terms of like their effect on calming traffic, they're very similar, right? Because they're designed for a similar sort of design speed and what have you. It's just really a question of placement. And if the placement aligns with the crosswalk, then it becomes a raised crosswalk as opposed to just a speed table.
Thank you.
Yeah, the raised crosswalks on this project crosswalks are currently there, right? So this is just taking what's there and then raising them. Question about the cost. It's being split over fiscal year 23 and 24. Do you have an approximate split? How much can be attributed to 23 and how much will come out of 24?
Unfortunately, Brett, I don't have that. That's a good question for us to follow up on. I know we'll still have some bills to pay for 23 because we are, continuing to process additional petitions. You'll hear some of those updates when we give the staff update later. But so obviously there's some work that's being done by Wade Trim and staff that we'll have to accommodate for. But anything left over beyond that would roll over. I don't have a good guess in terms of what that amount is right now, but it is something we'll be prepared for, especially as we bring this to council.
Okay, Megan.
Is this the street that also had the advisory bike lane put in a couple of? I was just kind of curious, I'm kind of curious, was there feedback on how that has gone so far, and did that relate to the discussions about what to put in as part of this project at all?
I think somewhat, yes. The advisory bike lanes to which Megan is referring, you may recall this was a couple treatments that we experimented in a couple different places. The DDA did it as part of the western edge of the William Street project. We did one on Summit, just north of Beeks, and then Granger as well. And this is where you have kind of the dashed bike lanes kind of on the side, and then the center running vehicular travel lane, which is meant to kind of yield to cyclists or give room for cyclists. But then if there's oncoming traffic, then they share the road like they would in any other condition. What we found is, there was a pretty positive reception among cyclists with that facility. It did have a sort of marginal traffic calming effect from what we can tell. But, in terms of, I think there was still this desire for some additional traffic calming too. And the good news too is, while I know speed humps, have impact on cyclists as well. The fact that these are bigger devices and not speed bumps, we tend not to do speed bumps. We do these, more elongated speed tables and speed humps and raised crosswalks. They tend to be less jarring for cyclists, and it's a little bit easier to get over. So I don't have a good answer about how well that played into like the neighborhood's consideration of these devices. But it is something that we're trying to be mindful of when we came up with this.
Cool, thanks. And yeah, that's been my experience too. The speed tables are not as bad as a cyclist.
Yeah.
So living one block off of this section, I'm very happy to see this. I was happy to see the proposed design come through, and I've heard a lot of support amongst neighbors. Like you said, the people seem to like the advisory bike lanes, but don't think it really did anything for traffic. And one neighbor told me a couple of months ago, he said you could put the speed limit at 1, cars will still come blowing through here at 30 or 40. So I think having this kind of a design is going to really help. Just this morning on the way back from school drop off, there were 2 cars that, you could hear them roaring up Granger to make the light to cross Packard. And of course, as soon as they cross, they slow down on the other side. But so yeah, I'm very much looking forward to these treatments and the treatments on the other side of Packard on Granger that we'll see soon too. So let's see if there are no other questions or comments. Well, actually, maybe this is a good time to ask this question, Raymond. A bigger picture question. We've talked a lot about the consultants are helping greatly clear the queue of applicants or petitioners. But how does that play into the actual, physical construction of these things? The budget is still the same. And I think I saw somewhere that we expect to clear 10 petitions this year. So it doesn't, is there a big disconnect between starting the petition process, the work within City Hall, and then being actually able to physically construct these?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we do is we piggyback all of our traffic calming installations as part of our resurfacing program. So it's actually line items in the bid package that, have whole scale resurfacing and all the different treatments. But then there's also a series of traffic calming devices that the contractors have to bid on. So raised crosswalks, raised speed tables, things like that, raised intersections. So then that way we have that capability to, when we finalize a project such as this, we can just kind of tack it onto that. And since there is dedicated funding, we don't need to find additional funding for implementation of those projects. In terms of kind of the, the relationship of, how cost effective it is to use the consultant for this work, I think still it's to be determined, but based on our initial kind of cost estimation of how much staff time it takes versus the consultant time, it seemed to be pretty close in cost. And since staff has pulled in a lot of different directions, this is allowing us to process more petitions. So we don't anticipate a large increase in the staff cost or the petition cost. And the construction cost is just a function of, what the outcome of the petition process is. So I think this will be the first fully complete process. So we'll have like one full data point to know if staff were to do it versus, the consultant, if it was largely the same. But as more of those are finished up, then we'll have a better and clearer picture if we'll want to continue this forward. Again, our whole strategy with hiring the consultant was because there was this big backlog, because we had, upwards of 17 or 18 petitions. We just really needed that added capacity, and the consultant was available to help us out. And so we felt it was well worth it to explore that option until we get caught up.
So if you can process, say, 10 petitions in a year, does that mean, then it's whenever the construction opportunity or the window becomes available, then it's just kind of ready to go? Or like, what does it, I guess it's still not clear to me, what good does it do to clear 10 petitions if you can only build one project a year?
Yeah, so again, that might require a future budget ask or budget modification. I know that might be a difficult thing to ask for, but what we thought was, well, first of all, there were during the budget process, there were adjustments made to the traffic calming budget. So I think, given how much all the competing priorities within the city, the initial request was for more than what it is right now, knowing or anticipating what you're bringing up, Brett, that there would be, if we clear the backlog of petitions, then that means we're going to have a backlog of construction, and construction is the heavy lift, or is at least the expensive lift. But again, this is just trying to figure out ways to clear this queue. And so we're processing the petitions, so then that way we can at least tee up the construction, and whether that makes it into the 2025 budget as, a special change, or a special budget amendment, or whatever the case may be, I think that's to be determined. We'll know when we get closer to running out of money how big of a problem it is we have to solve for. Okay. But it's a fair point. Like, just because we get caught up on petitions doesn't mean we get caught up on construction. So,
okay. All right, sorry to deviate there. Any other questions or comments on this particular project? All right, if not, is there a motion to recommend approval of the Granger traffic calming project between State and Packard? All right, moved by Dharma, seconded by Megan. All those in favor of the motion, please say yes or raise your hand. And all those opposed, please say no or raise your hand. All right, looks like the motion passes. So that will be forwarded to council, like Raymond mentioned earlier, right? All right.
I also say yes. I couldn't get my unmute off quick enough.
All right, thanks, Larry. All right, next up, the traffic calming subcommittee has been meeting for several months and brought forward a draft resolution for our consideration. So if Molly and Dharma could please review that draft resolution and answer any questions that you all have before we make recommendation. Is that going to be Molly, or is somebody going to share?
I'll kick us off if my cat doesn't turn off my computer.
And Molly, if you'd like me to I have the materials ready to share. So tell me if you want me to pull either the resolution, the backup, or whatever on screen. I'm happy to do that.
Well, I think once we're ready for the resolution, it'll be helpful to have it on screen. But I'm gonna basically talk us through the background that we shared in a separate document to help bring everyone along, because this has definitely been a journey. So as you all may recall, there were a few motives to the creation of the traffic calming committee in the first place. A big one was honestly what we were just talking about. So it's a very popular program. The last set of revisions made it easier to qualify, and what that means is that now there's been this growing backlog of projects that have been difficult for staff to process. It's the process as it exists is a large administrative burden. Costs of the projects have been going up, which I feel like tonight is yet another prime example. So in addition to the cost of the administrative burdens, each project is becoming more costly, which takes up more of the budget. It's generally not a systematic program. It's sort of driven by neighborhood demand. But neighborhoods also have the opportunity to veto at the end, which I'm going to talk about. I'm going to stay in order. Another piece of it is that it sort of generally uses a handful of devices, and often until now, the use of these devices is sort of limited to the traffic calming program. There's a general idea that any sort of vertical element, so that's things that you go over, like speed humps, speed tables, raised crosswalks, they're not going to be incorporated into designs without the sort of extensive neighborhood traffic calming program. That's been the practice historically. But we have this transportation plan now that has all of these different elements in it that sort of expand the menu. And so one goal was to try and think about how we might expand the use of those things. And then another piece of it is the way the program is managed. So the traffic calming program was established by a council resolution. And as a result, there are a lot of things about it that can't change without another council resolution. And it means that it's not very flexible, and staff doesn't have a lot of latitude to adapt as conditions have changed over time. It's also what's called an empowerment program. So there's this sort of scale of engagement with the public Is inform the first one or is ignore the first one? Like, so everything from like, we tell you what's going to happen all the way up through basically you tell us what's going to happen, which is the empowerment thing. And the traffic calming program is the only program, is that right, in the city that's this like empowerment level where residents have so much input over every step of the process, including whether or not the thing gets done once it's been through this costly administrative and design process. So that's all the background. Do people have questions or contributions about any of that before we dive into the actual proposal? Because I do feel like it took us months to get our arms all the way around all this context. And so I want to make sure that the rest of the commission has some sense of what we're dealing with. Okay.
Comments from anyone? No? Okay, go for it.
Y'all can always ask questions later.
Yep.
So that brings us to the recommendations. And I think Dharma did a really great job here of trying to root our recommended changes in the transportation plan. So all of the stuff that we're recommending is grounded in stuff we have already said yes to and that the city has already said yes to, like in broad strokes. The specifics, there's some, it's not all like identical, but that's the basic, that was the goal. And so I think now we can look at the resolution. Raymond, you were like so ready. We can skip all the whereases. I basically just explained it all. So here, I think it might make sense to sort of work our way through we'll go over all the resolved clauses, and then I want to make sure we have time to sort of talk through them. And Dharma, also, if you have anything to add about any of this. So the first one is addressing that problem where it's a council program without much flexibility. So this resolution recommends that City Council pass a resolution to empower the administrator to manage and maintain the traffic calming program and remove the requirement of City Council approval for individual calming project plans. So this thing we just did where we saw the Granger design and we recommended approval and it's going to go to council and then council's going to have to approve or deny, that would stop. Once the design was done and the neighbors had said yes, it would be ready to go into the queue.
Just want to make a note that still have to vote on the contract to approve the spending of the money.
Yep. So there will still be an opportunity for council oversight, but it will not be duplicative. Okay. Next one, resolved. The Transportation Commission recommends that City Council maintain the current level of funding in order to accelerate the processing of neighborhood requests for traffic calming and meet the demand. So we said maintain the current level because the current level is twice what the old level was. Given what we were just talking about with the cost of individual projects, maybe the current level is still not enough. It's enough to get us through the backlog, but maybe it's not enough to actually get this stuff built. But the goal is that at the very least, we shouldn't revert to the old funding level, which was half of our current funding level. Next one, resolve. The Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to amend the neighborhood traffic calming program to a collaborative model of public engagement instead of the current empowerment model. So collaborative is like one step down from empowerment. There's still a lot of engagement and participation by the public. There's a lot of embracing of the expertise that people who live and walk these streets and drive these streets and bike these streets every day will have about what is not working and what could be better. But it takes away that veto power. And hopefully it will at least somewhat address the administrative burden of the current process. I think there was a sense among staff that you need a pretty high level of public involvement in order to make sure that there's not backlash after a project. And that the number one goal, as Raymond told us in several meetings, was to not install stuff that we later had to rip out. And so that's where this comes from. It's still a pretty high level of public engagement, but it's going to address this a little bit. Resolve. The Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to install bump outs by default on streets with on-street parking. Bump outs should be considered in capital improvement planning streetscape projects. So this goes beyond the neighborhood traffic calming recommendation. So one of the ongoing threads through our committee meetings was this desire to see more speed management happening by default anytime we're resurfacing a road. And we went through a lot about what that might look like and what that might mean. And bump outs was sort of the thing that was pretty straightforward. It's in the transportation plan. This was a recommendation from staff that could address pedestrian visibility and also potentially do some speed management, and that we should just be doing these everywhere. So not just the neighborhood traffic calming, but everywhere. Next one, we transportation.
Hey, Molly, real quick.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to wait till the end for any questions or comments on these, or do you want to go?
There are more resolutions than I remembered, so why don't we pause and
Yeah.
address the first half, and then we can keep going.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So yeah, on the one we just went through with the bump outs, I just wanted to mention the staff recommendation that's on the other attached memo here, with a suggested edit from staff. Yeah, do you want me to read that, or Raymond, or how do we want to address that?
Yeah.
I assume Raymond, it's kind of you're
So
you're
this-
representative
why don't we
of
save
staff
this?
here.
Why don't we save this for the end?
Okay. All right.
This is sort
Sounds
of
good.
one of the thornier pieces.
Okay.
But spoiler, not everything we recommended was fully supported by staff. And we're gonna hash that out tonight. So next, the Transportation Commission recommends that the AAPS Transportation Safety Committee should be engaged in the development. I thought we were changing that language. Well, anyway, it's there for now, of a school traffic calming toolkit. The idea
Good question, is that an active committee?
It just restarted after 3 years of not meeting. I thought we were gonna take that one out.
Well, the staff memo does say it's reworded. It just says resolve the Transportation Commission recommends the development of a school traffic calming toolkit.
Yes, there it is. That's the edit we're looking at that. So we recommend that we develop a school traffic calming toolkit that will engage probably many stakeholders, including probably AAPS. The idea there is that there's sort of recognition and desire to potentially beef up what default improvements would look like on streets that are near schools, and that are parts of routes to schools, and that this would be another way to increase walking and biking to schools and create more safe routes to school without necessarily going through the Safe Routes to School project, but it would be just, again, part of the default. And that we're going to talk about doing bump outs everywhere, maybe if you're within a certain distance of a school, it's other stuff too, whatever that toolkit might look like, drawing again on what elements that are already in the transportation plan. All right, so the next one, the Transportation Commission recommends that City Council direct staff to routinely evaluate opportunities to incorporate traffic calming elements into all capital projects which may disturb the existing road surface, particularly those that are part of the All Ages, All Abilities network defined in the transportation plan, in a school walk zone where a record of crashes, speeding, and or resident complaints exist, or, this is still the edit version, possibly cut through streets as well, regardless of petition status. So this comes back to that desire to incorporate traffic calming and speed management into all of our road resurfacing projects by default. And it won't be necessary. There will be resurfacing projects that don't need any additional calming. They've already been calmed, or they are very low traffic, they're narrow, whatever it is. So it's not a requirement that there always be traffic calming elements included in resurfacing projects, but this was our attempt to move us towards calming as much as we can as a part of regular resurfacing. So again, outside of the neighborhood traffic calming, just this is what we do when we touch a street. And then finally, we'll keep working with staff on this stuff as a committee. So those are all the things. There's a lot in here. Some of it is focused on the existing, sort of revising the existing calming program. Some of it is about looking beyond. But yeah, we're happy. Let's take questions, and then we can talk about the places where the resolution we've written differs from staff recommendations.
Sure,
Brett?
yeah, this is the product of a fantastic amount of work and dedication by the subcommittee. So I'm really thrilled to get into this. Peter?
So the shorthand that I've heard for the current state is that the only way to get any vertical elements in your neighborhood is to go through the petition process. I mean, is that a good description? I think I heard Nick say that the other day when we were talking about 7th.
Yeah, that's fair, Pete. I think, we just know that they can tend to be fairly controversial. And so unless we have a fairly, we direct people to the traffic calming program if they want vertical devices.
Okay, so is the intent of these resolutions to keep it that way? Because I don't see where in the resolutions it says explicitly that if staff thinks that the right thing to do on to calm traffic on this area that we're working on is a vertical device, that they can just go ahead and do it. I mean, I don't see anything
I think that was
that requirement.
That was actually our intent with the clause that says we recommend city council direct staff to routinely evaluate opportunities to incorporate traffic calming elements. So I can say that our intent
opportunities,
our intent, well, I think our intent was to give staff the whole toolbox that they can use in any situation.
So I'm on board with that intent. And I think we need to be a little more explicit about saying that we are actively giving them, horizontal and vertical devices that they can implement as appropriate. That just isn't, that is not coming through to me. That we are undoing that vertical devices only by, neighborhood request. That doesn't seem clear to me here.
Raymond or Nick, I wonder if either of you have thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the interest in this from Pete, and I know this is something we talked about quite a bit, and even Molly kind of touched on it with one of her statements, and it's something that, I did drive home this point that the biggest concern we have is, without going through some process to identify if there's support for vertical devices, we don't want to be in a situation where we have to undo certain things. Now, that's not to say that, the read on this resolution could still enable us to do that. But I think the idea is we don't find it a very productive use of resources, both, monetary, capital, staff, if we end up putting in things just to take them out. And so what's nice about the existing program is, because it is, neighbor initiated, and it's a very sort of collaborative process to develop the devices. Like when we look at Granger, for example, that you all just recommended, we went through a lot of iterations to get to that point. We won't be able to do that on every single resurfacing project. And so I think the question for us that we would have to tease out is, if there is a location where we think vertical devices make sense, because maybe there is a documented speeding problem, or we know there's some other issue that we're trying to solve for, I think it would be up to us to figure out how we could get the appropriate level of buy-in from that neighborhood to install that device as part of a project, to ensure that it's supported, pretty broadly, and that we don't get people, having us take it out.
With this particular resolve clause that we're talking about, as a quick follow-up, is it a prerequisite that a capital project happen or be planned before these elements would, you can must they only be incorporated into a capital project, or can they occur outside of a planned capital project?
I think we were trying to describe two things. So one, there's a petition process, that exists, that would continue to exist. I think the other part of this was, and I think by saying capital improvement projects, we were trying to distinguish kind of levels of road treatment, because we do pretty simple surface treatments, the names of which I can't remember, which probably don't, warrant this level of, engagement and adding devices. And so I think that was really the intent of that, to talk about, a spectrum of kind of road construction projects and where it would be appropriate to evaluate this without a petition.
Okay, so it's still possible. Okay, sorry, Dharma, you had your hand raised?
I think someone answered it, so I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. Other questions? All right, going back up to, I think, the first resolve clause, remove the requirement of city council approval. So with the current plan, Transportation Commission approval is not required, but generally we give a recommendation one way or another to council. Do you anticipate that still happening? Is that something that can still happen, or should any of these come to us first?
We talked about this, that it would mean that we didn't see these projects, and I think they still could, but it would become it would be like an information piece of the meeting as opposed to a business piece of the meeting. So there would no longer be something for us to vote on.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it was something I was a little concerned about, just because there are, like, we already pretty much don't see DDA initiated designs until they're like fait accompli, basically. And so to remove another batch of things from what we would have a chance to see and give feedback on, but I think we always approve them. I don't think there's ever been a traffic calming proposal that has not received support from the commission. And so that's also a sign to me that, like, we probably this isn't necessary as an oversight step. It really just would be about informing and potentially giving feedback. So yeah.
Yeah, as long as it still falls in the category of informational, like so many of the other large projects that come to us, like whether it's the South State Street or Earhart Road, we get a great presentation and we get informed and we have an opportunity for input. That as long as it's in that bin, I think that's very appropriate. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a way to remove some of that administrative burden. If it doesn't have to go to council or to come to us, it removes the burden. It looks like Larry wanted to ask a question or make a comment. Or maybe not. Maybe you're just...
Oh, no.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I didn't want to make one.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm muted, so I wanted to make sure we had a chance.
Okay. No other hands raised right now, so do we want to dig into the bump outs?
Yeah.
So I think we read the resolved clause. And now, yeah, so Raymond's switching over to the staff comments, staff response. Okay.
Is my screen sharing appropriately? Is it the, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I think when we talked about this internally with senior management and staff, there was a little bit of heartburn over the prescriptive nature of this resolve clause, whereby we could easily imagine a situation where a bump out would either be cost prohibitive or, very marginally beneficial, or, just have some amount of technical challenges where we think a little bit of latitude in the space would be appropriate. The other thing to note here is, bump outs also cost some funding. So if as part of every single project, we're putting in 4 bump outs on a typical, 4-legged intersection, you're going to look at costs, escalating for a project, especially if it's multi-blocks wide. It may increase the cost by tens of thousands or upwards of $200,000. So just allowing some latitude, I think, to staff to determine the appropriateness of whether bump outs are done as a matter of course, I think is what we're asking for, is a little bit of flexibility here. So the suggested edit is to strike a couple words and add some language. So right now it says, resolve, the Transportation Commission recommends that the City Council directs staff to install bump outs by default on streets with on-street parking. Bump outs should be considered in capital improvement planning streetscape projects. Changing that to say, Transportation Commissioner recommends that City Council direct staff to install bump outs on streets with on-street parking if deemed advisable by staff when considering feasibility, costs, benefits, and other relevant factors. So again, it's just trying to allow a little bit of flexibility and discretion on this. We are trying to do a lot of this work already. I won't claim that it's systematic yet, but there have been recent projects where we have put in bump outs as part of the project, but there might be situations where it's not advisable.
So there's there's no like trigger event mentioned here, like if this passed, I mean, you wouldn't. Like, would you interpret this as we need to go do bump outs on everywhere immediately, or is this again when there's a capital project planned?
Well, the idea was when there's a capital.
Okay.
So like this is part of the whole, like when we're touching a street,
okay,
we should be installing bump outs.
Okay.
And that might be something that we can clarify in that language.
Because the second sentence is just consider them, but that's for streetscape projects, so that's kind of a separate thing. Is that right?
I think so, but I'm gonna let Dharma answer that.
Okay.
I don't think so. I guess I don't know where streetscape came in. I think it's just capital improvement street projects.
Is that because right there it just says be considered, so that kind of aligns with the suggested edit. Yeah, so if it's
I think
it seems like there's a discrepancy between those two sentences and as it currently stands.
Raymond, I think it's by default on streets with on-street parking, considered on every major thingy, whether or not there's on-street parking. I think that's what the second sentence is getting at.
Actually,
is that wrong?
Yeah, I think
okay.
I think basically when I wrote this, I thought my original piece gave that flexibility, but I think there's still something about it that, I understand it's probably still coming across as really prescriptive. So my read on this is that maybe there's some duplication in the revised version, but I think it tries to get at the same thing, which is allowing staff discretion based on those things. Consider it, but balance these things. And I think that we struggled with the fact that I think that we're trying to, in a way, our whole project here has been a reaction to the overly kind of prescriptive oversight nature of the current traffic calming. And then I think that we realized in some ways, or speaking for myself, I think that sometimes we were trying to similarly be very prescriptive. So I think that maybe there's some wordsmithing that could happen, but I think the fundamental thing was giving staff some discretion.
All right, Peter.
So our transportation plan says bump outs should be considered in capital improvement projects planning streetscape projects. That's one bullet point. And then implement a policy to install bump outs by default on streets with on-street parking. So that is in the plan that we've already agreed to. So I guess considering that, I am okay with the language as is. I would like to keep it the way it is. And if we want to put in some way to deal with a particular hard rock, we have a place where a bump out just absolutely will not work or will be too expensive, then let's come up with a plan for deviating from our default policy, which is install bump outs everywhere. So I guess I would rather I'd rather come up with a way for, like, what do we do in the situation where we definitely can't have one for some special reason, and then leave this language as is. So I don't know what that would look like, but for example, it might be that in that case, we have to ask council to deviate. So our standard is we put them everywhere. If we're not going to put them someplace, then we have to ask council to deviate. Or it could be that we have to explain why we're not doing it there. I don't know, but the default should be what we have in our transportation plan, which is install bump outs.
Molly or Dharma, do you want to I don't know, do you have a Dharma? Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll respond. I'm sure Molly and I might respond differently. Obviously, I'm looking at this from a council perspective, but I would love input from this commission just to think about how on balance there might be trade-offs in our own adopted transportation plan. So as I thought through this and thought about what it would mean to kind of do this by default on every street, so to speak, I, sitting from the room that I work in, looked out my window, and I live at the corner of two very low traffic streets. I'm not by a school. There's no speeding issues that I've ever really heard about. And I thought, do we really, as transportation advocates, would it be the outcome desired to install something that perhaps doesn't do anything to promote safety of the streets or to promote people deciding to walk over not walking, versus some of our other ambitious goals that we have, like traffic calming on major streets? And I started thinking, I think it'd be kind of overkill on my street. Many streets it would not be overkill, but I think there are a lot of streets like mine where it probably would be too much. And when I say too much, it's in relation to those two goals: zero traffic deaths and promoting people to use active transportation as a choice that's comfortable and viable. That's my 2 cents.
One move.
Thanks. To me, I err on the side of contextual expertise by staff. So I'm more on the line. I agree with Dharma in the respect that we have to kind of respect the context. And Pete, I totally hear you on our transportation plan, but that creating that default and saying that, hey, a lot of our funding is going to be designated to there unless proven otherwise. I almost, again, I err on the side of providing staff with that level of discretion and, again, contextual expertise. So that's just my 2 cents.
Peter?
Implementing a policy that says that we have some threshold for trips per day or something like that is not, I don't think, inconsistent with what's in the transportation plan. But I don't like the proposed language that says I don't like the proposed language. To me, that sounds like we'll know we need one when we see it. I would like some real a real specification around when we get them. And like I said, whether that's trips per day or some other measurement, that can be part of the policy. But I think that now is the time to ask for what that is. It may be that staff needs to go back and figure out what the cutoff is, but let's agree on the cutoff before we decide on the policy. I do not think that the proposed language is prescriptive enough. That's my opinion.
So that's also where I have consistently come down. I have an idea that I wish I had before 10 minutes ago, which is to revise the language so that, let's see, I need to pull it up again real quick. so that it would say, where's by default? Raymond, actually, it might be faster if you pull it up if you have it already. But basically, instead of the proposed revision, let's see. There it is. Okay. Direct staff to install bump outs by default on streets with on-street parking, unless. So that instead of there being total staff discretion, we set a floor and everything gets bump outs above that floor. And I agree, it's probably might take a little bit of doing to figure out what the floor should be. And we can include something about like, unless the cost would dramatically exceed the typical cost of bump outs, or there's some other topographical infeasibility, or I think we don't routinely have volumes on a street level, right? So I'm wondering if there's some other existing classification, because I understand staff's concern about adding to process for every resurfacing project if we have to then be collecting volumes or doing some other level of data collection that we would not otherwise have done. But that would be the construction of this, would be by default unless, as opposed to if. Pete, how does that feel to you?
Yeah, I think it could work. I mean, depending on what we choose and what level we set it at.
Yeah.
Right. Depending on what criteria we use and then, where we set the floor. I think it could work.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's what it will come down to. That'll be where the wrangling is. I understand that one of the concerns was around bump outs increasing the cost of every project. And I think that that's okay. I think that demanding that we when we make a street better, we make it better for everyone, and that is our default. I think that's right. So I'm not so concerned about increasing costs, period. But I recognize that there may be excessive costs in some instances, or other barriers, or in Dharma's case, other reasons why it's just not needed. But I want to have some real clarity about what that looks like. I do not want to leave it up fully to staff discretion, because it will just be too easy to say no every time.
May I also add, we're sort of talking about two different reasons why we wouldn't want a bump out, right? Dharma brought up the idea that some streets don't need them, like her street. So that is why we need a floor, right? But there could be other unusual circumstances that might, like you said, fall into the case of it's too expensive, or the topology doesn't support it, or some reason like that. I think it's okay to have an off-ramp to this for those that we can take under those circumstances, some of which we haven't even thought of yet. But for me, asking for approval to use the off-ramp instead of asking for approval to put in bump outs is the way that we should be doing it. That's what it means to me to be by default. So if we have to build in this off-ramp that gets used very rarely for really unusual circumstances, then let's do it. I'm okay with that too, to help cover some of those unusual circumstances that staff might be worried about.
Yeah, so I think I personally agree. I do think about certain areas like the Ann Arbor Hills area where maybe you have a cul-de-sac with one or two houses on it. And is that somewhere that we want to spend money to put a bump out, for the intersection, so process-wise, do we, at the risk of wordsmithing this during a meeting, do you want to instead have the subcommittee come up with wording on this and bring it back? Is that the right way to go about this, you think? Dharma?
I think, oh, go ahead, Molly. You go
I
ahead.
mean, I think so. I think I would want some more clarity from staff on some pieces. I think it's worth taking our time, given that we've already taken so much time, to get this piece right. Dharma, is that?
Yeah, I had another idea, which is that, I think another potential way to handle it, I'm not sure if you think this is reasonable, would be for the Transportation Commission's resolution to read that they want it by default with a specified floor. Like you could essentially be kind of recommending to council that they create this, and then it could be our work. No, it's better to do it this way. Okay.
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, if we can,
Council can
constrain
take
it
it.
within a month or so, I don't think, the time is a huge deal. As long as the subcommittee is, willing to meet again and.
I've still got the holds on my calendar. I'm not taking them away. They're actually done.
Nick.
Just as we were talking about timing there, one thing I would say is that I feel like there is definitely some time here, because pretty much all of our work for this year has been bid out already. So really, this isn't going to really affect much until next construction season anyway. So from that perspective, I would say there's not a big hurry here, because even if this was approved now and went to council next month, it's not going to really affect anything immediately anyway. So.
Okay. So I think that's good. Are there any other resolve clauses or whereas clauses that we think deserve attention to be looked at again? Yeah, Peter?
Just the part about making it clear that staff can consider vertical elements without a petition. I think we could add like 2 words into that resolve clause to make it clear that they have that ability now.
I'm good with that.
And there's also the around schools, there's a reworded version, right, in the staff. Okay, that I assume that's the preferred version rather than what's okay. So any other comments on this before we send it back to the committee? All right, so Raymond, I guess we're not going to take a motion here to approve or anything, right, on this, right?
Right. I mean, if you want to be really parliamentarian about it, I guess you could, make a motion to postpone, but we tend not to be as rigid. So whatever your preference is.
I with postponing, don't you have to have a specific date on when it comes back, or is that the whole postponement versus tabling?
Tabling, I think, suspends it indefinitely until you bring it off the table, but postpone typically means to the next meeting, but you can set a meeting, I think.
Okay, I think we all know, we're all in agreement with what needs to happen here, so we'll just, okay. All right, excellent. Thank you again. Thank you so much. This was a long overdue project that needed to be undertaken, and it was a big undertaking. So thank you so much. All right, let's see, that was that. Okay. All right, information and discussion section. Next is the Get Downtown update. The Get Downtown program provides commuting programs and services to downtown Ann Arbor employees and employers. Lillian Webb is with us this evening to give a brief overview of the Get Downtown program and answer any questions we might have. So there you go. Do you need to share your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Lillian, you should have co-host capability, so I think you should be able to do so.
Okay, well, I'll just get on that then. All right.
And it's good. It's coming up.
Thank you. Really glad to have a chance to connect with this commission and share an update about the Get Downtown program. I'm Lillian Webb. I am the Get Downtown director right now. And just want to take a few minutes of your time to kind of talk through the Get Downtown program. Just want to make sure we're all familiar with it before talking about its three main programs and where those stand, kind of as the last 3 years have been a lot of transition, and just finish with kind of where we're at and the plan moving ahead, and appreciate opportunities that the work of this commission and the staff with the City of Ann Arbor transportation group really helped make it possible to do many of the things we're working on. A little bit of background. The Get Downtown program was founded to provide an alternative for parking, the renovation of the parking garages that were reaching capacity and also needing renovation in 1999. And so multiple organizations came together to found this program and make it possible. It continues on to this day. It's continuing to help downtown employees commute and use not just the bus service, but also to walk, bike, carpool, take any sort of alternative transportation modes that reduce drive alone trips and relieve that capacity and congestion issue. And then the last kind of piece about background that I think it's important to know before we kind of go ahead is that it is still focused on the downtown area. So as we'll kind of get into, the program partners are the Ride. I'm an employee of the Ride. A lot of we're housed at the Blake Transit Center. A lot of what I do is marketing as well, but the Ann Arbor DDA is another founding partner. They are a large part enable the Go Pass program, which I think a lot of people do recognize the Get Downtown program for, or at least recognize that name of the Go Pass program, as well as contribute to helping us make people aware of the option to not drive when they want to go to work in downtown. And then, of course, the City of Ann Arbor is also a partner in the Get Downtown program with a lot of support, particularly for the 2 annual challenges, Conquer the Cold in the winter and the Commuter Challenge, which we're in the middle of right now in May. And the last kind of group that enables the Get Downtown program to really reach maximum numbers are the employers and other champions who help get the word out to folks who are working downtown about Get Downtown's program, whether it's posting the resources in their internal Slack channels or in their break rooms, and making sure that employees who are onboarded know about bike parking and that they can sign up for the Go Pass program and so on. So all of these are necessary, but of course, with you guys, we want to make sure we're talking a little bit about the Ann Arbor role with the Get Downtown program. So as mentioned, some of the benefits are participation in the challenges. There's free commute consulting. Not a lot of people are taking us up on that necessarily right now. There's a lot of great information on the Get Downtown program website about commuting without a car. But you can also, folks who are in the downtown area can reach out, and we will provide that personal support. The website, as I mentioned, is available. Whether you're downtown or not, you can easily access that information. And the Go Pass program is another benefit that's specific to the downtown area because the DDA is funding that through a grant to the Ride. So with that sort of background, I can move into a little bit of where we were before and where we are now with the Go Pass program. Go passes, they are passes that allow folks to use the bus for 12 months. Typical 12-month period is November 1st through Halloween of the next year that an employer will make a request to purchase Go passes for their team members who are interested in using the bus, and then they will hand those passes out to their employees for use to get to work and home from work. And once they leave their employer, employers will usually let us know, either they'll get the pass back and hold on to it until they have another employee, or they'll let us know that that person is no longer with them and not a part of the program anymore. So what they get when they receive the Go Pass, this is a picture of the current one, is unlimited rides on the Ride's fixed route service. And they're also going to be able to ride on the Flex Ride east and west in the areas outside of the fixed route service. They're also able to get discounts on the holiday and late night services that are fill the gaps when the Ride's fixed routes aren't running. They're eligible for emergency ride home reimbursement. Should folks be nervous about taking the bus, in case they need to pick up kids from school, there's this emergency ride home program that says, hey, don't even worry about it. We'll reimburse you if you need to call a Lyft or an Uber. Local businesses, being kind of a part of the downtown community, offer folks, if you show your Go Pass, you can maybe get 10% off of a coffee. And so they offer that. And once again, the kind of qualification for that is the workplace must be within the DDA boundary. And then there's some additional requirements as far as how often folks work in there and how old they are in order to be eligible for this pass. So this is just a graph that shows kind of from the 2019 to 2020 year, the Go Pass period that started in November 2019, how many employers were opting in, downtown employers, over 400. And we've reached kind of a new normal, but it's still growing, of about 200 plus employers who are still opting into the program. And even though we are more than halfway through the year, we still do see new people learning about the Go Pass program, moving into downtown where they weren't before, and wanting to participate and wanting to take the bus and be a part of this program so that they too can use an alternative form of transportation. With that, I'll kind of transition to the Conquer the Cold Challenge. So this occurs in the winter period, and it's encouraging commuters to use alternative transportation modes during the winter months, even when it's cold. So 2022 was a transition period for the Get Downtown program. So the last time that Conquer the Cold happened was in January 2021, prior to the most recent one. As you can understand, it was a unique time. It was still a lot of unknown in terms of the pandemic. There were 48 people who did log trips using our trip logging website or app, representing 20 teams. And a big focus of that one was supporting local businesses, whether you're ordering takeout or using alternative transportation to get your carry out, since folks may not have been going to work as often. We're excited, though, to have brought it back for 2023. This year's Conquer the Cold ran from January 10th to February 10th, and 214 participants recorded their trips. A little more than that actually ended up signing up or being invited to the website, but 214 logged trips, and they logged over 6,000 trips. According to kind of the rough calculations that our system uses, they saved 13 times more fuel and greenhouse gases than they burned or produced. There were a lot of walking and biking trips, but there were a lot of miles saved from folks who teleworked or carpooled, and those folks tended to come from further distances. The last program I'll mention here is the Commuter Challenge, which is hopefully more appealing since it's nicer weather than January, to have May and springtime be an opportunity to invite folks to walk, carpool, vanpool, take the bus, scooter, or whatever new forms of transportation that aren't driving alone, to do so with their workplace and get started in May and continue to do it even when the competition is over. So the previous Commuter Challenge was in September 2021. 48 people had logged trips representing 33 teams. Again, still a transition period. The ride had come back to full service at that point, but as we can all, I think, understand, there was still not a level of normalness necessarily to that time. However, this year, we are, midway through the challenge, and already 180 people have logged their trips. There are 50 teams and growing. A lot of them are workplace teams where people are competing and inviting their colleagues to join them in making sustainable trips or making trips that aren't drive alone. And what we're hoping to see as a program goal is not just that the folks who normally bike are same folks who we love from the Conquer the Cold Challenge who are willing to do it in January. They're not the only ones who are talking about this and getting excited and rewarded for it, but that they're inviting their colleagues who may be more nervous about it or haven't thought about it before to get talking about how we get to work and the alternative ways we can do it. So looking ahead, kind of coming out of that transition period, I just want to briefly touch on kind of some things that we're working on and where there's opportunities to tie in with this group. So all of 2022, we've continued to figure out how to restart those staple programs and make sure they're strong and growing and that more people know about them. Myself, I started in this role spring of last year. So I was getting to know folks, getting to know who could help me and how we could communicate about what was going on. And what we found is that a lot of people on the other side at our employers have also changed, maybe switched jobs or in different roles. And so it's a two-way street in terms of people getting a better understanding of how to participate in a challenge and are they allowed to do this or who's the right contact. So it's been an ongoing process of rebuilding points of contacts and general awareness and understanding of what Get Downtown does and can do for our downtown employers and community. Continuing ahead, we just finished a commuter survey. So it was 2 surveys that were end of April, beginning of May. The first one was directed at employers trying to get a better sense of their understanding of the employees' needs and work schedules and how we can help them. And then the second part was to commuters themselves, telling us directly how they commute, their schedules and ways they could use support or increased awareness. So the results of that are still forthcoming, but we're excited to look into new ways to help folks in the new normal that maybe is different from the last time that survey was done, which Get Downtown has done every couple of years, but the last one was in 2018. The other exciting part is to harness the community in this area's seemingly enthusiasm for things that support alternative transportation. So both with the community climate action millage that has funds available for walking and biking infrastructure and the millage for the ride to increase service hours and frequency. There's a lot of really good opportunities to help folks, whether they're 9-to-5 office workers or folks working in retail or restaurants, to be able to use alternative commutes too. So that's really what I wanted to share with you all today. I'm happy to take any questions if that's something we're doing. If it's not, feel free to reach me at information@getdowntown.org. And of course, I could not plug the commuter challenge, which you can certainly still sign up for and log trips through the end of the month, or you could log back trips where you've already been doing alternative commutes.
All right, do we have any questions or comments? It's a very important program, and you guys do excellent work. I love all the advocacy and the programs and the getting everybody involved. I think you guys do a great job, Lillian. Molly?
Yeah, thanks so much for that presentation. I didn't know the history of Get Downtown, so that was really really valuable context. This is, I guess, more just like feedback since you're here visiting us right now. I did the Conquer the Cold challenge, and I've been doing the commuter challenge, and I think they're great, and it's been great for like building community around, especially the winter. Like getting out there on the bike is not fun, but the platform, which my impression is like it's a third-party platform that we're using, but there are definitely some challenges with using the platform, and there's one detail in particular that stood out to me, which is that in addition to telling you about like emissions saved, it also claims to tell you how many calories that you've burned. And I would really love to see us separating the value of this kind of transportation from like any ideas about weight or weight loss. I think it can be harmful for some subset of the people who are doing these challenges. It can be like getting those calorie counts can be triggering. And so I would love if that's a setting we can turn off, if that's like feedback we can give to the to whatever company we're using, I would love that to be considered.
All right, anyone else? Peter?
I would just like to say that I wish normal people like myself who could get a Go Pass, even though I don't work downtown. I would really like to be able to get those for my kids instead of having to buy monthly passes, because it feels like once a month we're late for school and it's time to buy our bus pass. So it would be nice to have one that would go all year long. So.
All right, one move.
Yeah, actually, picking back off Pete's comment, when you look at the utilization of companies downtown in Highland, it's good to see you again. Great presentation, thank you. When you see the decrease in utilization of companies downtown on a post-COVID basis, and it kind of like stabilizes out, it like increases slightly, but not by much. That's similar to, office utilization period, right? With respect to Zoom and the way that people are just working and getting around. So it's really an evaluation of like what does normalized utilization look like, and can the Go Pass be expanded, not necessarily to just companies. So I just putting that food for thought about the changing patterns of our normative attraction zones of like jobs. And it's not to say like we are seeing actually increased activity downtown. Like companies, they still definitely want to be downtown, right? We want to continue to create that incentive and make it more attractive for people to use different modes of transit. But just food for thought. I mean, I think fundamentally office utilization has kind of changed. And so in most companies are doing kind of that 3 days in, 2 days remote kind of thing. And that's what seems to be prevalent. And so when you see the number of kind of company enrollment relative to company actual utilization of those passes, should we be thinking about a better, more effective way of kind of like getting ridership essentially? Because like to me, it's about increasing ridership and creating economic development. So can there be, different ways to think about it? Just, again, food for thought, just my observations. So, but either way, good seeing you, and thank you for the presentation.
I don't know if it's typical to respond, but
Yeah,
I will
sure.
kind of mention to each of you three. We did get Molly some feedback we did do an evaluation of the last Conquer the Cold challenge, and did bring that feedback to our vendor. They were receptive to a lot of the notes that we received from participants about how the platform worked, as well as also, things that weren't related to the platform. So we will plan to do the same thing for this challenge, and continue to kind of workshop and improve how to make it a seamless experience. And I think it is in one of the, is it the Moving Towards Zero transportation plan that has one of the items as looking into a similar pass. The Go Pass is because it is funded by the DDA grant. The Go Passes are kind of what they are, but it's certainly our eyes are open and ears are open for when there may be a chance to see how these other pass opportunities can expand. So thanks for continuing to keep your eyes and ears open for it as well.
All right, thank you very much again, Lillian. Happy that you were able to come and talk to us today. All right, so let's move along. In the interest of time here, next item is the resurfacing and related projects update. So Nick will give an overview of the 2023 resurfacing program and answer any questions. Nick?
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen here. And okay, can we see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome to the long anticipated 2023 street resurfacing improvements presentation. This should not take very long. I think we'll be pretty brief here. So this presentation, I'm going to focus primarily on our local street resurfacing. Our major streets have either been included in updates already, or we've done presentations on them or whatnot. So this will focus mostly on the locals, and some of the major ones are even under construction already. So when I talk about resurfacing here, there's several different types of treatments that we could be referring to, or that we typically use that term for. The first one is a preservation type treatment, which is non-structural. Those are our capital preventative maintenance type treatments, our cape seals, our slurry seals, crack sealing, things where we're not really disturbing the surface. We're kind of adding to it in some way, or renewing it in some way. The second type is what we refer to as restoration. That is a structural improvement, and that's what you can see in the picture there on the left, where we don't remove all of the asphalt. We maybe just remove a couple inches or something like that, and then put down a new layer of asphalt there. And then the third is rehabilitation. That's where we completely remove the asphalt surface and rebuild that entire pavement structure above the base. So some of the core elements in our local street resurfacing program. First of all, we use some of our pavement asset management data, or PACER data, that we collect on pavement condition to help inform that work and where we go next with our local street resurfacing program. So major streets, like I said before, we're not going to discuss too much of that here, but those are programmed with individual projects in our capital improvement plan. But local streets are usually lumped together either in our annual resurfacing program bucket, or in our capital preventative maintenance. And those are the two ways that we implement most of those projects. So resurfacing of a street is typically something that's contained within the existing road footprint. So we're not generally doing any, major huge changes. It's not a reconstruction. We're not widening. It's mostly a program that is designed around improving the condition of that pavement. Data collection on those is minimal. We're typically not doing anything major like topographic surveys or things like that. There's a little bit of discussion of this earlier, so I will mention that typically we're not collecting street volume or speed data on these streets most of the time right now. And then the design work is also minimal. There's very little engineering work. We put together a set of plans, so there's something that the contractor can bid on, but we don't spend a lot of time doing design. So all of that helps, keep some of the costs down as well. And then we're typically not obtaining any additional right-of-way or easements and things like that on these types of projects.
Dharma, do you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question about how the existing neighborhood traffic calming sits within that? So for example, we have a project right now planned for Granger. Would you do it while there was a resurfacing project, or would you be waiting for a bigger project?
So for the
I can see your instant messages on the screen right now.
I was trying to get back to the, I can hear you, but I can't see you guys anymore. So typically what'll happen with traffic calming is when we have a traffic calming project that is completed through the system, it will be added to that year's resurfacing program. And that's how we go ahead and implement those projects. We don't, I guess looking at that from both directions, we don't need to wait for a resurfacing project to come along to do a traffic calming project. And on the other hand, if we have a resurfacing project on a street and there's interest in traffic calming, we don't have to put that on hold to wait for the traffic calming to come along, because typically those elements can be added after the fact at not really any, not any additional cost. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let me try to get back to where I was looking at here. Okay. So some of the opportunities that we do have, I mentioned that, mostly we're focused on trying to get a new and improved pavement surface down on these, but there are other opportunities that we take advantage of while we're doing this work as well. Drainage and stormwater management is one of them. We tend to replace a lot of the old style storm inlets with a new style that has a sump in the bottom that's better for stormwater quality. Also, we upgrade sidewalk ramps to make sure that they're compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act. That's what you see in the picture there on the screen. Also there are some opportunities that we've taken advantage of in the past to advance us towards our Vision Zero transportation plan as well. And I think that picture is kind of a 2-for actually, because I think that's also a bump out as well on Granger, in addition to the ADA sidewalk ramp. So. So looking at some of these typical projects that we do, and how we implement this work. The annual street resurfacing program is the biggest one that the biggest way that we implement the street resurfacing on our local streets, and that takes most of our the street resurfacing that we're going to do in a single year and lumps it together into one project. And bids it all out as one package. And that tends to, in recent years, we've been kind of moving to area and area with that to kind of maximize our efficiency, I guess. Then we also have the annual street preventative maintenance project. These are the slurry seals, the cape seals. Those are the things we do on those kind of middle condition roads to maintain them in good condition. And then also we have a lot of resurfacing that actually gets done on standalone utility projects. So And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a moment here. Looking at what we're going to be doing with the 2023 street resurfacing project. This is primarily our street millage funds that are going into this. I'll use this opportunity to call back to a few meetings ago where I did a presentation on our dashboards that we now have. This is actually a screenshot from that dashboard showing some of the work that we're going to be doing in 2023 with our local resurfacing program. And in that, this is kind of one of the neighborhoods that we're concentrating on for 2023. The red lines in there, the rehabilitations, those are where we're completely replacing the pavement. The yellow is a partial depth resurfacing or a Cape Seal type work. And then those blue ones are some of those utility projects I talked about where we're actually replacing the water mains on those through a completely separate project. And then once the water main work is done, then we resurface the street once that work is completed. We also have the road bond, which has been mentioned before, and we have some additional work beyond that that's being done through the road bond. A lot of what's on this list is streets that we weren't able to do when we were back in some previous areas, and then we're sort of using some of this bond money as an opportunity to address some of those that we maybe didn't get to before. I will say the map on the right is A, not comprehensive, and B, not completely accurate, because that northern chord on Glastonbury that shows there is not actually happening this year. That's actually a future water main project. So, again, the dashboards show this in more detail as well. And then we have, I mentioned before, the utility projects. Most of these are water main replacement projects, which then also, once that work is completed, part of those contracts are also resurfacing the street. So these projects are all, well, some of them are lumped together, but they're separate from the street resurfacing program, and are bid out separately as independent projects. And I said we weren't really going to talk about majors, but I at least wanted to mention we do have a lot of work going on major roads this year as well. And I'm not going to go through all that list in detail, but that's what they are. And many of these are underway already. In fact, we've even done some very early season paving on places like Main Street and Scio Church. And then just to kind of wrap up here, I wanted to give one more plug to that, to our webpage and the dashboard. The first link goes to our road construction page and lists all of the road construction that we have going on this year, and also the individual links to all of those separate standalone projects if you want to get to those individual websites to learn more information about them as well. And then the second one is the link to that A2 Streets dashboard that I have, that I showed you a few months ago. And we really are trying to direct as many people that are asking questions to that as possible, because we really want that to be kind of the face of our street resurfacing going forward and be kind of the go-to place for people to go to look when they, want to see what's going on in a given year, this year, or maybe in even the next few years coming up. So that's all I have for my presentation here. I will open it up to questions as soon as I figure out how to get this back. Okay, well, I can mostly see people now, so.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks again for plugging the dashboard and webpage. I think those are really important. What questions do people have?
There we go. Okay, just hit the stop sharing button.
Peter, go for it.
I guess I'm wondering about curb replacements when we work on streets like this, and how do we know when a piece of curb is so far gone that it needs to be replaced?
Sure.
What is our spec there?
Yeah, there's not a spec per se. It's generally our technicians that are collecting data in the field review those things to try to determine how much curb we need to replace. We try to limit how much we do because it does add a lot of expense to the project if we do a lot of the curb. Typically what we're looking for is if curb has been moved, if it's settled, if it's been lifted out of place by tree roots, on occasion that happens. The primary purpose of the curb is to, keep water flowing. It collects water off the road and then gets it to the storm inlets. So we want to make sure that that there's not going to be any ponding issues and things like that. So that's some of the primary reason why we replace curb on some of these resurfacing projects. And then there is the case in some cases that curb is deteriorated so badly that it just needs to replace regardless of whether it's, settled or moved or what. So it's kind of a judgment call.
Okay, I guess I would like to advocate for a more prescriptive specification when it comes to replacing curbs. And this, my point of view here is that I spent a lot of time riding my bike near the curb and would like to, know that when we're redoing streets, we're going to be leaving a smooth surface that doesn't have crumbling bits of cement in it. So I think that's the time to do it, is when we're rehabilitating streets. The other question I have about curbs then is, as we add material to the street, like how small of a curb is too small? Like I think of the curb as doing two things, and you mentioned one, which is keeping water in the street. But then I also think of them as like keeping cars in the street too. And I guess I just feel like there are curbs in my neighborhood that are very, very small and really wouldn't stop anybody from, who is going off the street from winding up in somebody's yard. So how short is too short?
So, most of the curb around the city is standard size. What has happened over the years is in the past, overlays have been done into the curb, and that has reduced the height of the curb face, the visible height of the curb face. That's generally a treatment that we have tried to avoid more in modern times. Sometimes when a street's already overlaid, we have to overlay it again. But what we really haven't been doing much of in recent times is adding a significant overlay to the road. When I talk about, adding things to the top in some of our CPM, those are very thin, treatments. They're usually an inch or less. And they're usually not going into the curb line either. But there was a type of resurfacing that was done in the past called a cut patch overlay, where you would take the existing street, you would cut out particularly badly failing sections of it, fix those, and then put a whole new layer of asphalt on top of it. And in some cases, that's added a lot of height to the road and reduced the curb face. So I would say at this point, we're really not doing much of that. So it's not something that we're going to, we're going to see a lot of that happening in the future, I guess.
Okay, that's good. I would like that to stop. Though I did notice on I think Weldon last year, we resurfaced Weldon, and there are some curbs that are very small and very crumbly, and I just would like to know that we have some guidelines or specifications that say when they get to this point, we're just going to have pay to replace them because they are not serving the purpose that they're intended for. So.
Yeah, and it may depend on what kind of treatment we're doing on the road there. If the pavement is in such a condition, for example, that we can do a mill and fill type treatment on it where we're not removing all of the asphalt, then we kind of are stuck with re-overlaying the curb again. But we try to keep that certainly to a minimum. Eventually it's going to, that situation that I just mentioned would get to the point where, a full rehabilitation will have to happen where we remove all of the asphalt. And that would be the opportunity to then not re-overlay the curb again.
Okay.
All right, who else has questions? Nick, I think I ask this every year. You talked about the different segments of the city where you focus on neighborhood streets, and this year it's over the Ann Arbor Hills area.
Right.
Can you say where the next couple of years are going to be? Is there a map or a plan?
I can. It's on that dashboard.
It is
Actually,
on. It has the years on it. Okay. Great.
so I will refer you again to that dashboard.
All right.
It's on I think there's several tabs that you can click on there. For current year, and there's one for upcoming years as well. And I think next year we're over. We haven't figured out the more precise areas, but we're over back on the northwest side of town again.
Yeah, that was
couple
kind of the
areas
question
where-
was, you were just there last year, so 2 out of the 3 years you're in the same area. So I was
and that's following the data that we have on the Pacer ratings. We're following the places where we have the worst streets, basically. So
okay. All right, anything else? Dharma.
How do things get updated? Just last year, and I'm sure that this happens every year, the best laid plans, sometimes things get pushed out. And, last year I just remember on the list, not the dashboard, but the HTML page that you guys maintain, the web page with the list. I had Scioto Church up there for a long time, even past when we knew it wasn't going to happen. So I'm just kind of wondering, with the dashboard, are things more updated or?
Yeah, we're definitely trying to make that the way that we go about updating things on that map rather on that static list. So, not to get too far down in the weeds here, but, every one of the projects that you see on there has a project manager attached to it. So, I mean, really, it's something that I'm trying to stress to our project managers to, if we're directing people to that dashboard and we expect it to be relatively up to date, maybe not up to the day, up to the second, but that they need to get the information to the person who updates that. And we do have somebody in our GIS, working in our systems planning department that is doing all the updating. So as long as we get them the information, it'll be pretty up to date.
All right, thank you.
And I would add too that sometimes on that we'd have a list of projects on that page often because we want to maintain the links to where those project pages are. Even if the project isn't happening this year, we want to make sure that that link is still there because it could still be active from a public engagement standpoint and things like that as well. So.
Okay. All right, thanks, Nick. Look forward to this over here.
You're welcome.
All right, next topic, I think hopefully will be a quick one. Vision Zero Implementation Committee. As the work to develop a Vision Zero implementation strategy draws to a close, the Vision Zero Implementation Committee's primary charge will be fulfilled, we believe. So Raymond and Julie, who's the chair of that committee, can recap some of our discussion about its future and answer any questions, or if you want to have any discussion about dissolving the committee after our next meeting, which I think is in June.
Yeah, Brett, thanks for teeing that up. And Julie, sorry for springing this on you. I just kind of listed you on the agenda because you're.
No, that's fine.
So yeah, we just wanted to kind of keep you up to date. The Vision Zero, just as Brett outlined, a lot of that work has been pegged to the work that Sam Schwartz, the consultant, is doing for us. Their contract is coming to a close. And so at the next meeting, they're going to kind of hand over all their final deliverables. And forecasting that, we had a discussion with the Vision Zero Implementation Committee about the desire to continue to meet or maybe change focus or maybe, sunset. Julie and Brett were there for that discussion. I think there seemed to be some consensus that the good work that this commission is doing, there didn't seem to be an overwhelming need or desire to continue to have a subcommittee where there's a lot of overlap between the sort of projects that they're reviewing and what we bring forward to this commission. So it seemed like most of those committee members were supportive of when those final deliverables are received to, cease to meet after that. So a little table setting for Julie to fill in any blanks beyond that and give any other impressions she had on that discussion.
Yeah, I'll just add that the concern that both Brett and I raised during the discussion was that there would be a lot of overlap between the discussions that happen there and in this commission meeting, and that was already starting to happen a little bit. And on the other hand, all of the committee members expressed a willingness to continue if they were needed. And I just want to say that they were great committee members, and if we need them for something else, they seem to be ready and willing to go.
Right. Yeah, I think we're expecting the final deliverables from Sam Schwartz, in the coming weeks, and our next meeting is scheduled for June. So I think the plan is to review and receive those, and there is no requirement for the commission here to formally do anything to end a committee, but we just wanted to bring it forward here to let everybody know that that's our plan. Anything else? Yeah, Molly.
I just have a quick question. I feel like in conversations over the last year or two about, our transportation plan says all these great things, but why are projects still coming forward where we're not using the full suite of things in there? And the answer was always like, well, we're waiting. There's this Vision Zero committee, and there's Sam Schwartz, and we're waiting for that work to be done. And so I guess my question for the committee members is, do you feel like we're at the point where we're going to be able to use all the tools in the toolbox? Like, do you feel like that piece of the work is where we need it to be?
Yeah, I mean, a big piece of it is this major streets calming, which is now called something else, but I mean, that seems to be ready to go. That the prioritization for that was one of the sort of biggest topics of conversation during the committee, and it's something that Sam Schwartz thought about a lot in response to our comments. It seems like it's ready to go, but let's see it happen. I assume the projects will come to this commission as they can.
Yes, indeed. And speed management is the kind of new term we've given it. But yeah, Julie's absolutely right. I think the work of that subcommittee was focused on sort of the mechanics. And then when we roll out towards implementation or start teeing up some of those projects, we would definitely bring those before this commission.
Yeah, the goal is to make sure that processes and procedures are aligned with the transportation plan, and that some norms are set. And I think what your committee is bringing forward is a big part of that. The speed management program is a big part of that. But we wanted to make sure we weren't starting to get into the implementation on a project by project level, because those are things that should frankly come here, or shouldn't really live in a subcommittee. So we are happy with the forthcoming directives and memos and more detailed work that Sam Schwartz has been doing, and with what we've seen be implemented by city staff. So
then I guess my question then for staff is about the timeline. So everything's been bid out for this year, so we know that none of this stuff is going to go into this year's projects, but are we on a timeline to where next year we've got all the tools?
That is our hope. Yeah, I think between the Safe Streets for All grant that we got, and some of the other funding sources, we feel like we're going to be in a very good position to start implementing this work, especially in this the next construction season. So yes, that is very much what we are working towards.
Awesome, thank you.
Anyone else? All right, looking at the time, Raymond, I wanted to get your thoughts on the next topic, the last big topic, which is all ages and abilities bike facilities. I haven't seen the materials for this. I don't know what you're planning for it. Is it something that you think we should try to fit it in here and run a little bit over our meeting time? Or do you think we should push it? Because you're going to actually be gone for June, aren't you?
I am.
So,
Yeah, I can get through the presentation in about 10 minutes. A lot of it's just kind of some overview, and then I'll talk about next steps and what we're teeing up. So, you know, it's up to the commission to see if they want to carry you past 9 or not. But
I think given that you're going to be gone next month, Raymond, maybe if is it okay with people to go 5 or 10 minutes over? Okay.
Sure.
All right, let's do it, Raymond.
okay, hopefully my screen is sharing.
Yep.
All right, so what I'll do is I'll just kind of give a very brief overview of the plan itself. So just as a reminder, you know, the Moving Together Towards Vision Zero transportation plan has kind of 5 mobility goals and values: safety, mobility, accessibility for all, healthy people and places, or healthy people and sustainable places, and regional connectivity. Then the project or the plan is then broken down into 22 kind of key mobility strategies. And the 6th one of those is to build out a safe and comfortable network of bike routes for people of all ages and abilities. So specifically what this calls for is, you know, we often refer to the map. So the map is pictured here on the screen. It has a lot of lines on it that show kind of a interconnected web of bike facilities, most of which are purple, which are to be built, proposed all ages and ability routes. So that may mean that there are existing bike lanes or some sort of bike facility there, but they don't quite meet the threshold of what we would consider an all ages and abilities. Some of the other lines are brand new lines on the map, which indicate that, you know, there's nothing there now. And so we would look to retrofit or install something moving forward. I will say we consult this map on a regular basis. For any capital project, we refer the capital project managers to it, so it does influence a lot of the work that we do. And so the strategy specifically says to build out a safe, comfortable network of bike routes for people of all ages and abilities, and it sets kind of 3 targets. The first is to install 5 miles of new or upgraded all ages and ability routes each year. The second is to complete the full all ages and abilities bike network by 2035. And the third is to implement a complete wayfinding system by 2025. So then the plan goes into the different types of facilities, and it talks about the different, first it talks about the different types of roadways, and then what kind of facilities would be appropriate on those, and then give some descriptions below them. So the first is looking at tools on local streets, or what you might consider neighborhood streets. So these are low volume, low speed, 25 miles per hour less than 3,000 vehicles per day. The first sort of treatment that's identified is a bike boulevard. And the bike boulevard is described as having clear signage and markings, designing features that discourage vehicular trips, design features that encourage safe speeds, and features that also facilitate a clear and comfortable experience. So in the picture, there's, you know, this is an example of a bike boulevard where bicyclists are allowed to traverse down a road, whereas vehicles are prohibited from going. So you can kind of see a sign that says, you know, prohibited movement except for bicyclists. Shared lane markings, or what are often called sharrows, are also an acceptable tool in the plan. Again, this is for local neighborhood streets. So they help designate a preferred route for cyclists and can raise the awareness of people biking among cyclists themselves, but then also among motorists. So this is, you know, kind of a very, you know, low barrier to entry sort of bike facility for, you know, implementation. It's just largely pavement markings, maybe accommodated with some signage as well. Then we have kind of moving up a tier. So for minor streets, so these are roads that might be between 25 and 30 miles per hour, but not a lot of traffic, maybe less than 10,000 vehicles per day. And the types of facilities, there are, I think, 3 or 4 different types of facilities. The first that's identified is kind of the traditional striped painted bike lane. You know, this was the sort of facility du jour, a while ago. It demarcates a certain portion of the street for cycling. It may include kind of that green pigment that we have at conflict points. And it's most appropriate on streets with low to moderate speeds and volumes. Taking that up a notch, again, looking at minor streets, you can take that bike lane, and if you have the room, you can buffer it with paint. So you kind of add another line parallel to it with maybe some hash marks in between. So again, it demarcates a portion of the street, but it gives a greater separation between the cyclists and the motor vehicles. There's not just a single line, there might be two lines with some additional space between them. And again, this is appropriate on streets to low to moderate speeds and volumes. There's also the concept of contraflow bike lanes. The idea here is that you would have a bike lane that goes kind of against traffic on a one-way street. So it provides a two-way bicycle facility on a one-way street. But in doing so, you have to consider some protective elements to ensure that oncoming vehicles kind of respect that bicyclist's realm. And this is mostly appropriate where there are few turning conflicts. So in the picture, you can kind of see on the near side of the picture, there's the contraflow portion of the bike lane, right? Because this is a one-way street, but you can see kind of the corresponding with direction of traffic bike lane on the opposite side of the street. Then when we talk about stepping up to a different road type, now we're talking about tools for major streets. So these are streets that have posted speed limits of 35 miles per hour or greater and more than 10,000 vehicles per day. So again, you can kind of follow this spectrum and this sort of graduated approach to how we would implement bike facilities. So the first is a protected bike lane. The idea is that these run at street level and they provide some sort of physical separation from the vehicles in the form of flexible delineators, parking lanes, curbs or concrete medians or planters. And the one thing to note is that special attention at intersections should be made, or where there are bus routes where passengers are boarding and alighting the buses, to make sure that we're not setting up conflict points that might pose a safety concern for either cyclists, pedestrians, or motorists. One thing I do want to note while I'm on this slide, a protected bike lane does not necessarily have to be a bidirectional cycle track like the one that's pictured here. The one that's pictured is the 4th Street, or I'm sorry, it's the William Street cycle track at 4th Street. You can still have a protected bike lane and it just be single direction, but it still has to have those sort of vertical elements that provide that physical separation from the vehicles. There's also another concept similar to the cycle track or the protected bike lane where you have a raised bike lane. So this is where you actually take the elevation of the bike lane and kind of bring it up to sidewalk level. Obviously, you need to make sure that there's clear separation between people who are walking and biking. But the idea is that, the cyclist is a little bit more elevated, a little bit more visible. And then just the sheer fact that the bike facility is raised provides that vertical separation from the vehicular travel lane. And then also for major streets, you have off-street shared use paths, or sometimes called side paths. So this is, a bike and ped facility that's physically separated from vehicles, either by some sort of open space or barrier. It tends to complement on-street routes. And what that means is if you think about the border-to-border trail, which is pictured on the slide, it can act like a spine. And then from that spine, you can then radiate out other facilities, whether that be, the bike lanes or the protected bike lanes that we spoke about earlier. And when done really well, it can help facilitate long distance commuting, such as, the border to border trail can connect, Ann Arbor to Ypsi, for example. So with those facilities in mind, just to let you know what's coming up next, the first thing that we are focused on is looking at our network of buffered bike lanes and upgrading those to protected bike lanes. We feel this is a pretty low-hanging fruit. We already have the physical separation established, but it doesn't include the vertical elements. So what we can do is retrofit that sort of buffer area that currently exists and put in some sort of vertical delineation, probably plastic posts or plastic delineators. just because those are materials that are readily available. They don't require a lot of design and engineering, and they can be deployed pretty readily with the know-how that we have both amongst staff as well as with contractors. The other thing to note, and you've been hearing a lot of these reports month to month, is, as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to take seriously the implementation of this and incorporation of these facilities into the capital projects that are being done. So there are a lot of projects that are going to incorporate an all ages and abilities facility. So Earhart, State, Miller, Platt are all going to have protected bike facilities as part of that implementation. 7th Street in Greenview will have an all ages and abilities facility too, but it may be a lesser, type of facility, because like I said before, when we talk about local neighborhood streets, it may not rise to the level of a sort of protected or, vertical separated bike facility. But some of the conversations and the outreach we're doing now are really trying to hone in on, what that facility could look like and what implementation of that would be in those neighborhoods. And then the other thing is council did approve a little while ago, a couple months ago, the new maintenance equipment. This is actually a picture of the equipment. This is the street sweeper that can go in areas as narrow as 4 feet wide. And this is important because we're kind of been waiting on this piece of equipment before we start installing a lot of those vertical delineators, because we don't want to set up the facility for failure where we put in all these vertical devices and then we're not able to maintain it. So the last I heard, this piece of equipment has been ordered. Was already kind of teed up before council even approved it, and it's been approved. So the order has been made official. It's still going to take some time. My understanding, last I heard, it's going to be delivered in September. But what we're trying to do in the meantime is, as I just mentioned, we're working on the design of the facilities to upgrade those buffered bike lanes. And the hope is that there will be a nice convergence of all these things where the street sweeper and the installation of the vertical devices on those buffered bike lanes will happen kind of seamlessly, and we'll get those done by the end of this calendar year. It's what we're shooting for. I think I made it in like 11 minutes. My apologies. So that's the last of my slides. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have.
Questions for Raymond? Peter.
So our plan calls for 5 miles per year. Like how are we doing on that, towards that goal, and how do we expect to do next year? Like, are all the pieces going to be in place so that we get 5 miles this year?
Yeah, I mean, if we do the 11 miles that we're planning, we'll have caught up from last year where we didn't do any, and then we'll have an extra mile to spare, Pete, that we're going to bank for the year in the future. It is a target. I'm not going to sit here with a straight face and say we're going to hit 5 miles every year. 5 miles is pretty ambitious considering the sort of track record we've had in the past, and how much effort has gone into getting consensus or at least support to implement these projects. But we are going to try to move these things along as fast as we can. So we're going after the low-hanging fruit first, but there are going to be a lot of difficult decisions on facilities in the future. So
what's the right way for us to check in on progress to the 11 miles then, Raymond? I mean, can that be a line item in your staff report?
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely do that. We would definitely give you an update on the progress that's being made. I mean, typically what I do for those staff reports is I wait for major milestones, like design is complete, project's out to bid, something that shows kind of where we are or if engagement is going to occur. That's when we'll give you updates. I tend not to come to you with 30% design, 50% design, 60% design sort of stuff.
I guess what I'm going for is if we're not on track, I'd like that to be shared. Like what's the right way to share that we're not on track and that we need a course correction, we need to ask for help? Is your staff report the right place for that? If it happens, like if we do get off track.
I think you need to answer that.
Okay. I guess I would like to see whether or not we're on track. It can be a yes or no answer in your staff report. That's what I would like to see.
Okay.
So we have this ambitious goal of 11 miles, right? Are we on track to it still? Yes or no?
If we do the 11 miles this year, yes.
I guess what I'm saying is in between now and the end of the year, I would like to find out, not on the last day of the year that we're behind. I'd like to find out before. We should be halfway done with it halfway through the year, right? We should be, we're either on track to finish 11 miles in a year or we're not. And that is the level of detail that I'd like to see.
All right. Yeah, I'm gonna try to end this topic here in the interest of time. I look forward, I'm sure, Raymond will be sharing the plans for the 11 miles where and as they get installed with the staff reports. And speaking of, let's move on to the staff reports and updates. Raymond, if you want to right back to you to go through that real quickly.
Sure thing. All right. Par for the course, I'll just share kind of the highlights. Annual street resurfacing project work is scheduled to begin in June and last through fall, possibly into 2024. Scioto Church Road is expected to be complete in July. Geddes Avenue resurfacing from Observatory to Highland is currently underway and is expected to also be complete in July. South Main Street water main and resurfacing, phase 1 of the project from William to Liberty is now complete, and work on phase 2, which is from Liberty to Huron, is underway. The plan is to be done with all that work by Art Fair. 7th Street in Greenview, the first public meeting on the redesign was held on April 25th, and then construction is scheduled for 2024. Greenview, the second public meeting is tentatively scheduled for June 7th. MDOT coordination, there are some intersection improvements at Huron and 7th Street. There was the traffic signal modernization. The pavement markings have been removed. If you're curious, they were removed on May 9th, just over a week ago. We were able to get a contractor in to remove those. There's also intersection at Huron and 4th. MDOT is going to upgrade the signal there, and that project is currently in the design phase, expected to be done in 2024. And similarly, MDOT is working on a signal upgrade at Geddes and Washtenaw. That project is also in the design stage and also scheduled for 2024. DT has repaired 209 streetlights so far in 2023. Traffic calming program submittals, the big one you just talked about, which is Granger. And then next up is Grandview, had its first meeting on May 11th last week. And that's for Grandview between Jackson and Dexter. We talked a lot about the traffic subcommittee work, so I can skip over that. Transportation implementation plan update. The next meeting of the subcommittee is June 26th. We already talked about those final deliverables. We touched on speed management. We are working towards establishing focus groups. So those postcards are expected to go out, I think this week or next, to set up a series of, or no, actually, I think they already went out, to set up a series of focus groups in July. Again, the idea is to just get some additional feedback on that program. The annual snapshot, I do want to draw your attention to this. Pete, this maybe speaks a little bit to what you're talking to, which is, some of the work that's been accomplished over the past year for 2022. We have developed a sort of interactive dashboard sort of snapshot report that can be found there. We're going to be doing this annually to showcase that information in addition to some of these regular updates that we give to the Transportation Commission as well. Bike to Work Day is this Friday, to reiterate a point that Lillian made during her presentation, and that commuter challenge is also underway. So again, just re-emphasizing that message. Vision Zero Lunch and Learn for city staff, third installment will be on June 21st. We will have a presence at the African American Festival, doing bike rodeos, giving away bike helmets and bike lights as well. So hopefully we'll see you there. We just finished our League of American Bicyclists Safe Cycling course yesterday. It was a 10-hour course spread out over 2 days. We had 7 people attend, so it was pretty well received. The Michigan Association of Pedestrian and Bicycle Professionals, the bike ride that was scheduled for next Monday, I believe, has been rescheduled. And date has not yet been determined. So do make note of that if you were planning on attending that. Please reach out to Suzanne Flowers to get additional information. I have included the crash reports for both March and April in the backup for the packet. I'll switch over to that in just a second to show those to you. I will say I uploaded the April one or Chris actually helped me upload the April one on Monday because it revealed itself when it was sent to council. So we grabbed it and then provided it to you as well. So if you looked at the packet on Friday, you may have not seen that the April report was there as well. Packard speed limits were reduced and it took effect last week, a week ago today. They were reduced to 35 miles per hour. We added some kind of warnings to motorists that speed has been reduced with conspicuity flags and advanced notifications with message board signs. And then lastly, the no turn on red downtown signage is complete. And again, that's work that you all accomplished on your end. Just real quickly, looking at the pedestrian crash report and the bicyclist crash report. In March, there was a fatality on Huron at Parkview. There was also a serious crash at Catherine and Ingalls and Nixon and Huron Parkway. And then for April, there were no pedestrian crashes and just no injury crash for cyclists either. All right, and that concludes my update.
All right. Next, liaison reports. Any commissioners who specifically serve as a liaison to another body or organization are invited to provide brief reports. Are there any?
Hello, I can't raise my hand. I was going to give a brief thing on the Commission on Disability Issues.
Sure.
Yeah, they just brought some minor things to my attention. I don't know how. One of them is, and I'm asking for more information. They were complaining. There was a complaint about a sidewalk gap on Scioto Church somewhere, and so I asked for more information on that. And up near I guess up near Glencoe Hills, there, and I don't know if we cover this, but there's a bunch of either e-bikes or scooters that people just put on the sidewalks and make accessibility problems over there. And they asked me to bring it to you, so that's what I did.
Thank you. Dharma.
I'm not sure. Nick, did you want to respond to that? Because you could go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. No, I just wanted to mention, respond to Larry's comment about Scioto Church sidewalk gaps. By the time this project that we're currently working on right now is fully complete, there will be no remaining sidewalk gaps along Scioto Church, within the city's jurisdiction, at least. The last section of sidewalk on the north side between Greenview and 7th might be delayed a little bit because we still needed to work out all of the easements and cost sharing agreements within Arbor Public Schools since they own that property. So the road may get opened and then the contractor may have to come back later to install that last piece of sidewalk, but it is still coming.
I suspected that's where it was. Thank you.
All right, Dharma.
Just wanted to give a report out from council. We just got the budget passed on Monday. I took a deep dive on transportation spending. I guess I won't go into a ton of detail because you all got the presentation at our last meeting, but it passed. Very excited to see we have $6.5 million dedicated this fiscal year specifically to active transportation projects, which is about $1 million more than in the current fiscal year that we're in. Things like street light replacement, traffic calming, sidewalk construction and ramp repair, road configurations, accessible pedestrian signals, as well as time for staff to work with the Tree Line Conservancy on the Tree Line Trail. And obviously, Raymond, correct me if I get any of this wrong, but I understand that that amount that I just said doesn't count federal grants and earmarks that we're pursuing for even additional things. So is that right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Awesome. I also wanted to just kind of briefly follow up on the Act 51 resolution that this commission passed. After our last meeting, pretty much immediately, Councilmember Briggs and I set up a meeting with the Chief Financial Officer to really understand how the Act 51 funds are being used and what opportunities there might be. And I shared this with Molly and Brett and Megan, and I won't, this doesn't need to go on long, but basically it was really hard to tease apart what we spend the Act 51 funds on because there's a ton of overlap in terms of both capital projects as well as maintenance in the infrastructure because so many of these projects are integrated. So sometimes it's not even really technically, I think, tracked separately. So examples of capital improvement projects that have Act 51s in them that are not part of the 5% that's specifically set aside are road configuration projects, accessible crosswalk signals, some annual sidewalk repair and curb ramp program things, just to name a few. And we had a difficult time seeing how we were going to increase that without potentially cannibalizing basically things that we want to see for active transportation. So my understanding is that basically the 5% limit, you really only feel it when there's a strictly non-motorized travel project and it's big. And an example of this was a few years ago, the Allen Creek Berm project was funded through Act 51. There weren't enough funds in the 5%, so they temporarily raised it, I think, for that year for an additional $1 million to complete. So basically, our conclusion was that if we set aside a larger percent based on how it's kind of being spent and allocated now, the cut would come at the expense of some contracted services such as pavement markings, capital roads projects that will have significant pedestrian, cycling, and traffic calming elements. One example, the Hill and State project, Earhart project, things like that. We can't make cuts to the bonded road projects. So in conclusion, my kind of assessment after this was that we should keep an eye on it, but I wasn't really seeing opportunities to make effective use of this in our budget to increase our non-motorized without kind of cannibalizing things that are also for active transportation. That's
All right,
it.
thank you very much for that explanation. All right, any other liaison reports? I don't think so. Okay. Commissioner Communications. Let's see. All commissioners are invited to provide reports and updates. I also need to take a moment to thank Suzette. I think last month was her last meeting on the commission. So we have now a second opening. But thank you to Suzette for her service to this commission, and grateful for her contributions during her time. All right, let's see. Raymond, there's a note here that both you and Nick will be absent for the June meeting, but we'll have other support. I'm sure you guys will take care of that. Call for agenda items. Just go ahead if you have agenda items that you'd like to see added. Please email them to Raymond and or myself and or Megan. Next meeting will be held on Wednesday, June 21st, 2023 at 7 p.m. Again, a virtual meeting. And if there are no objections, we will adjourn our May 17th meeting. No objections. All right, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your patience and for going a little later tonight. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.